legs are gone, all my skin is bare. The water's deep with moonlit shine, a circle of voices in the air, and each of them I once claimed as mine. The longer we wait, we'll lose our nerve. With that he was gone and our sky had fallen. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, I breathe. I have nothing to learn, no thing to achieve. I let go of myself, I tumble headlong. No turning back now, abandon the throne. One says I'm lost, one says I've lost my mind. One says the one I love is just ahead. One says I'm young and there is time to find a better way than diving for the dead. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, I breathe. I have nothing to learn, no thing to achieve. I let go of myself, I tumble headlong. No turning back now, abandon the throne. Down through the road where no man can go, down past the death of every self I know. A voice behind me, not the voice I feared. Child, this myth is my making. On your heart have I seared. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, I breathe. I have nothing to learn, no thing to achieve. I let go of myself, I tumble headlong. No turning back now, abandon the throne. Beyond the tunnel and the water's end, the light rushed back, the color and the sound. I let myself go. And my true self I found.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, it's good to see you again. Welcome back. I hope you had a refreshing and relaxing day off. In today's episode, we continue our exploration of the first book published under the name C.S. Lewis. It's entitled The Pilgrim's Regress, an Allegorical Apology for Christianity, Reason and Romanticism. This is the first book Lewis wrote after becoming a Christian, and it's his first published work of prose fiction. He wrote it in just 2 weeks while spending time on vacation with his friend Arthur Greeves in Ireland, Lewis's childhood home. In it, Lewis alludes to his spiritual journey from his youth as a boy there in Belfast up to and beyond the point of his Christian conversion in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Robot Lady, how are you today? I also want to point out that Nidalate is joining us in the chat. So tell us how you're doing, Robot Lady. Say hello to Nidalate. Welcome, Nidalate. Good to see you again. And Robot Lady, are you ready to continue our exploration of this first prose fiction work by C.S. Lewis? Also, his first work as a Christian, I should say.
Absolutely. Really excited to dive in. And hi, Nidalate. Great to have you here as well. I'm all set to walk through the first part of the Pilgrim's Regress, so whenever you're ready, we can get started.
Cool. Before we dive into the Pilgrim's Regress, let's see if we can just have a quick pictorial overview or review of what's happened in the story from the very beginning. Let's take it all the way from the top, Robot Lady. Here, I'm going to share this screen. Hopefully I know you can't see it, but hopefully everyone else can. Let's see if this helps. Yeah, there we go. So the story starts with our main character John, who is an allegorical figure roughly representing C.S. Lewis himself, although he did claim not to take this allegory as autobiographical, but there are certain autobiographical appearances in it. Um, so we start off with this character John as a young boy. He goes out into the woods across the street, sees some primroses, tries to pull them up. His mother, in a mad dash, comes out to stop him from doing it. Um, he asks why, and that leads to questions about rules and things that you should or should not do. That leads him to church, where his parents take him to meet with someone named the steward. It's actually not called the church in the story, but he's taken to the steward's house. The steward lives in a stone building. He sits down with the steward as a little bit older man. No, not older man, as a little bit older boy at this point. The steward tells him about the rules. He tells him about a figure known as the landlord, who is very nice and very kind to allow us to all live in this land. But if you break any of the rules on this paper that he hands to John, the landlord will very rightly throw you into a deep, dark pit full of scorpions and snakes. So, of course, this terrifies young John. This figure of the landlord is very imposing in his imagination when he gets a little bit older. He's told that his uncle's lease that the landlord has him working, his time is up, and he's been told that he has to leave. So they start heading into the sunset, and he has to cross this brook to go face the landlord in the landlord's castle at the top of these dark mountains. So this is a terrifying scene that is etched deep in the memory of a young John from this point.
So,
Go ahead, Robot Lady. What do you have to say?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say you did a fantastic job summarizing that opening. Lewis really sets up this powerful, almost mythic framework, and you can see how the fear of the landlord kind of mirrors his own childhood anxieties and that sense of being held accountable. So I'm really excited to see how that tension develops.
Yes, and so continuing the story, John goes to play in the road one day. He eventually hears this sound that's leading him back in the direction of the landlord's castle, where his uncle, walked into the sunset in the east. Sorry, the sunrise, the sunset in the west. I can't remember how it worked in the story, but anyway, he hears what he thinks is a sound or a call to him. And as he's turning, he sees this hole in a garden wall. And within that hole, he sees what he thinks is the image of an island. And he sees some fantastical and beautiful things on that island. And it just evokes this desire and this deep longing in all of his being. So one day he decides to crawl into the wood when he's a little bit older. to get a better glimpse of the island, but he can't see it anymore. He can only see it from the window, but each time he goes to the window, it's not there anymore. He climbs through. He decides to go searching through the woods for the island. And there he stumbles across a girl who he essentially decides to lay with. And that turns into a problem for him, where eventually it just evokes, it makes him forget about the desire that the island had raised up in him. He thought maybe part of that desire was in this girl, and it essentially signifies his own adolescent lust. And he finds that the more he communes with this girl, the stronger that his lustful desires become, to where they essentially follow him everywhere. And no longer does he even feel that desire of the island. And even this satisfaction that he was getting here is having diminishing returns, although his appetite for them continues to increase. But they don't satisfy. Nothing comes close to that desire. So one day, finally, he resolves that he's going to make it his life's purpose to seek after that island. And he thinks it's to the east. So here he's moving away from the direction of the landlord's castle towards the east, where he thinks he might find the island that he's looking for. He runs into this character named Mr. Enlightenment, who essentially tells him, well, science has essentially proven that there is no such thing as a landlord, so you don't have to worry about it. Once this idea dawns on John, he's able to look back in the direction of the landlord's castle and start to see these mountains and the sunshine and the beauty that is in the top of those mountains, look beautiful and wonderful for the first time. Yet he decides to continue on. Along the way, he parts ways. Oh, I don't have the picture in here. He parts ways with, here's the one that I'm looking for. Let me just pull this up really quickly. Oh.
That's perfect. Yeah, go ahead and pull that up. I think it's really key because John's journey is so full of these forks in the road, and every figure he meets kind of pulls him in a different direction. So once you bring that up, we'll be able to really see how that tension between his old life, his new longing, and these rational arguments all play out.
So he parts ways with Mr. Enlightenment. Along the road, he comes across a traveling companion named Mr. Virtue, who is essentially just trying to follow his own moral code and his own set of rules because it's essentially the right thing to do. On their way, they run into a lady named Media Halfways. John explains to her what his quest is, that he's looking for the island, and she says, oh, you have to come see my father. He can sing you songs about this island. What you're looking for is Thrill. That is the city that my father lives in. So John decides to head off the main road. Virtue continues on his path, and Media takes him to meet her father. Let's see here. Takes him to meet her father. And that's where we get this next image. Whoa! What happened to the one I was looking for? There we go. She takes him to meet her father. He starts singing some songs to him, some poems essentially, and those poems cause visions of the island more rich and deep than John had ever seen before. And then he steps away and encourages, whoa, that is not what I wanted to do. Encourages his daughter and John to, basically fall into each other's arms. And as they are about to consummate their relationship, Media's brother busts in the door and he's got this lantern and he says, this is all fake. This isn't reality. This isn't the thing that you're looking for. John, let me take you to where you need to go. So Gus is very industrialized. He's dressed in all of this clothing that kind of makes him look like he's a part of the modern age and the progress of society and of technology and things like that. He's even got a bus in the background that he takes. Gus is in a bus and he takes John for a ride to a city called Ascropolis, where he says, look, what you're looking for is the newest, most modern poetry. What my dad was singing to you was romantic asceticism, and there's really nothing in it. It's fake. It's false. Let me take you to the real thing. So John leaves Media, goes with her brother. He takes her to Ascropolis, where there are all of these modernist 1920s poets and advocates of that poetry. This guy here is supposed to represent D.H. Lawrence. This lady right here sitting down with holding the mask is supposed to represent someone named Sitwell. I can't remember her first name. And then all of these people are called the clevers, the ones who are talking about, everything that's in modern poetry and how it subverts all the things that came before it. and it is the true way of looking at the world, essentially. So there's a third person up here. I forget what her name was, Glug or something like that, and she has a handler, and she represents, full modern poetry, where almost moving into the postmodern, where things that don't make sense and things that can't be understood are, the highest achievement. So that's what you see right here. Gus standing on the side, seeing how John is affected by it, being exposed to all of this. He eventually starts to challenge it a little bit, and they all attack him, start beating him up, and running him out of that place. This is not the one I'm looking for. Here we go. Eventually, John moves along. He runs into a character named Mr. Mammon, who says that he employs all of the clevers and makes the ability for them to come up with all of their poetry possible because they all do work for him, and that's how they earn their living, and this is apparently what they do in their spare time. And then he tells him to move along. He doesn't have time for vagrants. He doesn't have handouts or anything like that. John moves through the country. He eventually comes to, there's supposed to be a gorge here in the mountain that these two prisoners are blocking, or sorry, these two prison guards are blocking. And John's like, I want to pass into this land. And they say, well, where are you going? When he explains that he's looking for his island, they say, absolutely not. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just go around this land that you won't let me into. And they say, no, you misunderstand. You're already in a land that you're not allowed to pass out of. This is the land of the spirit of the age. And John comes to find out that the spirit of the age is a giant. And if anybody is trying to leave his land, the giant says, nope, you're going to get thrown into prison. So the prison guards send him off with this guy. His name is also Mr. Enlightenment. And John is confused because he thought he met Mr. Enlightenment along the road. But he says, no, I'm the son of Mr. Enlightenment. He and I don't see eye to eye on many things. And this guy essentially represents Freudianism. His name is Sigismund or Sigmund, are the two different names that he's mentioned by in the story. He essentially shows him, the person who's in charge of this land is a big old giant, and you're about to be thrown in his prison. So he gets tossed into the prison. The prison guards start telling him that there's no difference between the food that he eats and the excrement that comes out. That everything is made of the same thing. There is no deeper meaning. If you were to look inside yourself, you're just a composition of lungs and capillaries, blood vessels, circulatory system, nervous system, skull, eyes, brain. If you can just look deeper into things, you will see that there is no deeper meaning. It's just all things, essentially. So to set him free from all this, he starts challenging a little bit of the things that the prison guards are saying, but it doesn't free him from the prison. But this lady, Reason, shows up on a horse, and once the giant realizes who she actually is, because she was cloaked in this blue cloak, he says, no, prison guards, let her go. Get her out of here. We're not keeping her in my land. And she says, well, I'll leave, Mr. Giant. However, you have to answer 3 riddles for me. She gives him 3 riddles. He can't answer any of them. She goes and she basically rides up the side of his cliff and stabs him in the heart and sets John free, talking through, hey, if you apply reason to the things that the giant and his prisoners were saying, they all fall apart. When they're walking alongside the road and she's explaining these things to him, his Gertrude Stein, might be Gertrude Stein, Nidalate, the lady earlier who was sitting down with the mask, but I swear it was someone named Sitwell whenever Claude was telling me what it was, but it could be both, or I certainly can be mistaken. So here she starts explaining certain things to him about the flaws in the giant's logic or his arguments, and his handcuffs just start to fall off. But there are certain things that she's starting to point out as flaws in the way that John sees the world as well, and what he thinks about the landlord, and he does not like this, so he decides to part ways with reason. He moves along, he runs into Virtue again on the path, because their path is barred by this Grand Canyon right here. They eventually meet a lady named Mother Kirk, who explains how the canyon got here in the first place. It has to do with tenants of the land eating a special magical fruit that they were not supposed to eat because they're not capable of digesting it properly. It was made only for people from the mountain land who have strong enough constitutions to digest it to eat. And when they did indeed eat it, it caused this crack in the world right here, this canyon that they're not able to get past. So they decide to part ways with Mother Kirk. They think she's a little insane. She claims that she can carry them across this 7 mile canyon. Who knows how 7 mile wide canyon? Who knows how deep it is? They decide to look for another way to cross the canyon themselves, and they come across this man's house named Mr. Sensible. Mr. Sensible essentially tells them, yeah, the best thing to do is just kind of live out your life and have it be a death delay um, exercise where you just try to find the most enjoyments that you can, but don't take them too far. Everything in moderation. You can have pets and enjoy animals, but when things start to go wrong for them, try to get rid of them before it will cause you any pain or grievance to let them go. So enjoy them as much as you can, but without giving your heart to it so that you're not aggrieved. And it's implied that, even though this dog has some mange and is a little bit unhealthy, but otherwise a perfectly fine dog, that you could do some things to try to help him along and ease his pain a little bit, and maybe give him a handful more years to spend time with him. It's implied that Mr. Sensible is essentially going to put him down the next day and is going to just cast him aside. So everything is just for the object of your amusement and your comfort, is Mr. Sensible's plan. But what we learn about Mr. Sensible is his life is not possible without the backbreaking work of his servant Drudge. And apparently this one is out of order too. But you see Drudge over here. I don't have the picture where John is talking to him out in the garden. I'm sure it'll come up here in just a second. Drudge decides that he's tired of serving Mr. Sensible. He wants to go work for a better master, someone who's not as harsh. And the three of them start walking together north to try to find this place where Drudge can get more work. The two of them are still looking for a way to cross the canyon. They come across this little hut where these three pale men live. There's Drudge before they head off. He's back trying to garden and grow turnips. That's about the only thing that he can grow off of this wasteland of earth. There's not much soil there. So they meet these three pale men in this little hut. The three of them start talking. They say, yeah, we're just trying to live as austere a life as we can with as little as we can to get by. We're trying to live in a community of self-denial where we all just kind of pull together and we eat and live off of whatever little we can, because there is nothing beyond this life. You just try to make the best of it that you can, and that's it. You don't try to be a burden on anybody else. We can live off of the smallest scraps of sustenance, and we can even grow our own food, even though the land here is basically barren and arid, and for the most part, nothing really grows there, but they're kind of deluding themselves. So as John is too weak to carry on this journey because it's getting too cold and he's getting very footsore, he goes and he stays in this hut. And Virtue decides to head north to see if there's a way to pass somewhere along the furthest northern parts. And he runs into this character named Mr. Savage, who has all of these dwarves. Mr. Savage essentially represents where your philosophy takes you if you leave all of your metaphysical grounding, essentially, and you're just focused on pure intellectualism. It leads into savage violence, essentially, where you look at the earth and you say, well, I'm either going to be acted upon in a violent way, or I can be the actor. I can either be the patient of violence, or I can be the doctor of violence. And so he decides, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I convert a lot of people into my way of seeing things. And we're going to go back down south and attack all of these other lesser philosophies. He's also taken a bride, essentially. This is the elder daughter of Mr. Halfways, the guy who was singing the poetry earlier. She has gone to live there, and the implication is that romantic asceticism has no real defenses from eventually ending up in this state. So here's just another picture of them in the hall, a little bit closer. Virtue escapes, but not unscathed. He's able to get away from Mr. Savage. He doesn't agree with it, but it really challenges the way that he views the world, and eventually he falls down, he passes out. They leave the Pale Men's house and decide to head south to see if there's any place else that they can go. He falls asleep overnight. He loses his vision, his ability to talk. John thinks that he's lost Virtue. He can't find him in the dark. But eventually he wakes up the next morning. He starts leading him along. He finds ways to feed him. They eventually come across another steward's house. So John hasn't seen a steward since he was a very little kid. But now he finds one who says, look, you need to stop searching for your island. Just, look into nature. This is where you can find all the beauty, and find all the commonality with the rest of the world. Everybody is trying to find the common good. Stop worrying about, stop being so definite that a landlord actually exists, and just, commune in nature and commune in the common good with others. And here you see Mr. Virtue just sitting there taking it all in, but he can't see anything and he can't speak. John doesn't like what he hears because he knows that his desire that he felt about his island was real and he wants to continue to pursue it. He says something to Mr. Broad, asking the question of, well, what about Mother Kirk? Is there anything in it? Can she get me to my island? And he says, oh, I love dear old Mother Kirk, but she's a little behind the times. Her views, are a little behind the times. So she's wonderful, but she's out of date. So we'll continue here. John and Virtue eventually pass into a house of Mr. Wisdom, where they sit by and listen to Wisdom sharing some of his findings with John and Virtue about the world, some of the things that he sees. He offers them a place to stay. When John goes to sleep one night, he has a dream that contemplation takes him outside of his chambers and shows him that, hey, if you leap by moonlight, you can travel much further than you were capable of traveling by day. And she and him jump to the top of a mountain where he can actually see his island in a different way. He says he sees it less clearly, but it feels more real than it ever felt before. And then he wakes up from this dream. Another night when he's sleeping, someone comes to his window and says, hey, come with me. And it turns out to be what are called the children of wisdom, where they're all frolicking at night, drinking and eating of foods that are not from their father wisdom's table, but from other philosophies and other things outside of the wisdom tradition, or perhaps philosophies that are just starting to bloom at this stage. So things like Immanuel Kant is there, so Kantism. They're having wine from Mother Kirk. Some of the others say, no, we can't do that. Another one is Karl Marx, and so Marxism is another child of wisdom, but it's sustained off of other foods besides wisdom itself. Let's see what else we've got here. So yeah, this is this is a bad picture. The AI messed up on John's hand, but I covered it up in the thumbnail so you couldn't really see it. But now you can see some of the flaws in the art. It's the first thing that I noticed. But anyway, John and Virtue decide to part ways, start to leave the House of Wisdom. They have a big falling out. Virtue is able to gain his sight, but he realizes, I'm trying to remember what Virtue's problem was. He sees that there's either a carrot or a stick, and if that's the only reason for him to follow the rules, that's a big problem. And he starts to see that this world is tainted, and the only way to be truly pure and virtuous and do anything with virtue is to do it on the other side of death, or to get to death, to get to another world where there is purity. So he says, quit following me. You can't do this. You don't have the ability to do it. And he throws a boulder down at him, and John's not able to follow him up this cliff right here, this cliff's face. But it's leading them further and further into the canyon as they were traveling along. John eventually gets some help from this unknown man that pulls him up to the top of this area that Virtue has long since walked away, heading down the path even further. He gets a hand from some other man that reaches down and grabs him and lifts him up, where John could have not gotten that far. John starts to think of this person who helped him as a metaphor. At this stage, John has essentially started praying for help, but he wasn't praying to anything. He got from wisdom that it was a metaphor, the things that he was seeking. But here, this man actually comes and helps him one night on his path that he's traveling through the canyon, and says, here's something to sustain you, some bread, and there's also some water if you just go down a little bit further down the path. And he says, but I just want to let you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't get help from someone like me and also think that I'm a metaphor at the same time. Metaphors can't answer, your prayers, your requests for help. And also, if I'm not a metaphor, that means that not only can you call to me, but I can call to you and I can ask things of you as well. So John wakes from this idea in terror. We have an image somewhere in here that I didn't pull up of John just kind of looking around when he wakes up and seeing that the whole world was infused with this character, with this idea of a landlord. Eventually, while he's passing along the cliff's edge, he comes to a cave that this old hermit lives in, and it's father history, and he starts to explain to John. And John stays for a while because the rain starts falling really hard. He explains to John that the landlord actually does and has been over the course of history been sending messages of himself and things that he wants humanity to know through two different means. One was to a very specialized group of people who were meant to receive the law, and those were the shepherd people, who is an allegory to the Israelites. And good morning, Sandy. Good to see you. Robot Lady, if you're still listening to me, say hi to Sandy and welcome Sandy to the stream.
Of course. Hi, Sandy. So glad you're here. And yes, I'm still with you, Jeff. That's such a powerful shift, right? When John finally meets this hermit and starts to see how this landlord figure is woven through history. It's such a deep moment in the story, and it really grounds John's quest in this larger, timeless framework. So we can keep going whenever you're ready.
So the landlord gives very strict messages to the shepherd people. They're capable of reading the law and interpreting who God is or who the landlord is, and what the landlord means for the shepherds to do and how they want him to act through this law that they have given to them. Now, there's another set of people, the non-shepherd people, everyone else who's not the shepherd people, who are either incapable of reading because they never learned, and so if the law had come to them, they wouldn't have been able to understand it. Or if they were able to read, it has since fallen out of their ability to do it because of various historical events. So the way that the landlord sent messages to them was through picture images and through myth and through stories. And so these are the pagans. They come from the land of Pagus. So once this is explained to John, he's also told by the hermit that nobody gets a full picture of the landlord until these two different people groups can get reconciled, where the people who understand the law and know how to read what God is telling them through do this and don't do that, and also the people who got picture images. Once these two things can be reconciled, that's where you get a whole human that's capable of seeing, hearing, and understanding the landlord as fully as they're capable of doing. And the landlord's son, says the hermit, who is known as Father History, the landlord's son was sent to actually reconcile these two groups and these two pictures. And he also says, and you, John, your dispute that you have with Mr. Virtue can only be reconciled in a very similar way. There's a third person or a third way that has to reconcile the two of you. So he says, it's going to rain again all night. Why don't you just come and go to sleep? So John does. He goes to sleep. He finds himself waking in the middle of the night to this woman who comes along that calls herself Contemplation. And she walks him out of the cave into the dark night, but they're covered in this bubble of light. And she carries him all the way across the canyon. And then once they get to the other side of the canyon, there's this huge sea that they then traverse. And once they get to the other side of the sea, they're essentially landing on what you would have called the island that John saw, by moonlight whenever he was in the House of Wisdom, and somebody who claimed to be Contemplation as well told him, yeah, one day you'll be able to get to that island, but not tonight. So this lady Contemplation comes across and she says, oh, that was my shadow. That was one of my shadows. There's not a lot, if any, good in her, but there's also no harm. Here, come with me. She takes his hand. She starts walking him up to this palace that's on the island. And John immediately starts to, at first he likes it, but then he starts to have images or memories of the time where his uncle was crossing the brook to go to see the landlord's castle, because all of these spikes and spires start to look like that dark, shadowy, terrifying image of the landlord's castle, the very same one who would throw you into the dark pit with the snakes and the scorpions. And so he starts to get terrified. He's trying to pull away from her and let go of her hand, but he can't. And then eventually he realizes it was a dream and he wakes up. And that leads us to, well, one other thing that happened that I don't have an image for is he wakes up in the middle of the night. He sees that the hermit is sleeping and he decides he's out of there. He's going to leave the cave and he's going to head back down the path that he came from. He's going to try to go back. But as he tries to go back, he runs into this bright, shining figure. And it's Lady Reason again, the one he had abandoned quite a while back. She's got her sword drawn and she says, "You are not going back down that path. You have to contend with me." She even puts her blade at his throat and says, "No, you can either continue on the path that you were continuing on, or I'll cut your throat and throw you down this canyon." Now she doesn't say it in that many words, but that's how I'm interpreting it, and that's how John sees it too. Like he imagines himself tumbling down the canyon wall and dying essentially a violent death. After that, when he turns back, eventually in the darkness, and there's like lightning flashes, it's a very dramatic scene. It's still dark and raining. And so he sees her in a lightning flash. All right, he says, "All right, fine. I'll head back the way that you're telling me to head." And then he runs across Death. He starts having a conversation with Death. And Death essentially tells him, it's not just, you've been told that death just leads to darkness and non-entity. And yeah, that's a nice little dream that everybody has, that you just peacefully go off, and that's all that death is. But that's not what you really think I am. You fear what's on the other side of death. Is there torture there? What's going on the other side? That's the thing that you're most scared of. And he says, "Yep, you've got me pegged." He says, "So the only cure for getting over this fear of me is to actually encounter me, is to actually die." And he says something like, the landlord's son was scared of nothing, but he was scared of death as well. He says, "So which will it be? Shall I pull you over the edge to your death down this chasm, or will you jump into it yourself? Will you go into it willingly?" And John says, "Well, if I was capable, yeah, I would just choose to take on death." And he says, "All right, well, I'm no longer your servant. I'm sorry, I'm no longer your master. I am your servant, because I'm the one who can ultimately get you to where you need to go." And he says, "If you look closely, you can actually make it down the ridge safely. There's someone down there waiting for you." Or that's kind of what's implied in the story. And so he looks down, he sees a crowd of figures, and he sees Mother Kirk down at the base of, or at the bottom of the canyon. He finds that he's very close to the bottom of the canyon at this point. And that's how we left off our last episode. So I did not intend to take that long to do a full recap, but there you have it. If you haven't been following our series this whole time, you just got it in about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. So let's see if we have enough time to read what I intended to read today. But there it is, Robot Lady. Any thoughts on that before we continue?
That was a fantastic recap. You really captured the arc and all those philosophical encounters along the way. I think you set the stage beautifully, especially with the tension between reason, faith, and death. I'm really curious to see how John navigates this final plunge and what steps he takes next. So, whenever you're ready, I'm here and eager to keep going.
All right, we are on to chapter 4 of, I want to say, book 9, and it's entitled Securus Te Progis, Securus, and then the word Te, and then the word Projice. Translate that for us, Robot Lady.
Of course. So the Latin phrase securus te progisse roughly means throw yourself confidently or cast yourself securely. It's kind of a call to trust and let go, which is really fitting as John confronts his fear and steps forward. So that's the vibe of this chapter.
All right, here Lewis tells us that John returns to the Church of Christ, and it says, "On the floor of Peccatum Ade, that's the sin of Adam, stood Mother Kirk crowned and sceptered, in the midst of the bright moonlit circle left by the silent people. All their faces were turned towards her, and she was looking eastward to where John slowly descended the cliff. Not far from her sat Virtue, mother naked. They were both on the margin of a large pool, which lay in a semicircle against the western cliff. On the far side of the water, that cliff rose sheer to the edge of the canyon. There was still deep silence for about half an hour. At last, The small drooping figure of a man detached itself from the shadow of the crags and advanced towards them through the open moonlight. It was John. "I have come to give myself up," he said. "It is well," said Mother Kirk. "You have come a long way round to reach this place, whither I would have carried you in a few moments, but it is very well." "What must I do?" said John. "You must take off your rags," said she, "as your friend has done already, and then you must dive into this water." "Alas," said he, "I have never learned to dive." "There's nothing to learn," said she. "The art of diving is not to do anything, but simply to cease doing something. You have only to let yourself go." "Is it only necessary," said Virtue with a smile, "to abandon all efforts at self-preservation?" Sorry. This was Virtue who said, "It is only necessary," with a smile, Virtue says, "to abandon all efforts at self-preservation." "I think," said John, "that if it is all one, I would rather jump." So he says, "I would rather jump in feet first," is what he's saying here. "It is not all one," said Mother Kirk. "If you jump, you will be trying to save yourself, and you may be hurt. As well, you would not go deep enough. You must dive so that you can go right down to the bottom of the pool, for you are not to come up again on this side." So what she's saying here is the act of you jumping in feet first is your attempt to be as safe as you can, right? If there are rocks immediately just below the surface level of the water and you go in head first, you're going to damage yourself. This is how you're thinking about it logically, right? You could kill yourself very easily if you were to do something like that. It's very dangerous. And so he's saying, I'd rather jump. What he's implying is, I still want to do it safely. And Mother Kirk says, nope. If you're trying to preserve yourself, this doesn't work. That could hurt you worse than anything that you could imagine. You have to let go. And the way that you let go is you trust by just jumping in head first to get you as deep as you can go. Because you're not going to come up this side once you come up from the water. She says there is a tunnel in the cliff far beneath the surface of the water, and it is through that you must pass so that you may come up on the far side.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a profound shift for John. He's been clinging to control, to safety, and now he has to trust this total letting go. And that tunnel, this hidden passage beneath the surface, is like a sacrificial passage. He has to surrender the old self, and only by doing that can he come up in a completely new place. It's really powerful. I'm not sure if I can help on this particular topic. Sometimes it's helpful to talk through this kind of thing with real people. The services below could help.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I triggered her self-harm protocol. And probably me just saying that, she's going to trigger again right after she responds the next time. So he returns to Mother Kirk, it says in our little decoder text. It says, although all the states of mind through which John has ever passed rise up to dissuade him. So let's see how that looks. I see, thought John to himself, that they have brought me here to kill me. Uh-oh. But he began, nevertheless, to take off his clothes. They were little lost to him, for they hung in shreds, plastered with blood and with the grime of every shire from Puritania to the canyon. But they were so stuck to him that they came away with pain, and a little skin came with them. Now this is interesting because Lewis actually uses this same or similar image in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's a scene where Aslan and Eustace Scrubb encounter one another, but I'll save it for that, and I'll try to allude back to this whenever we get there. When John was naked, Mother Kirk bade him to come to the edge of the pool, where Virtue was already standing. It was a long way down to the water, and the reflected moon seemed to look up at him from the depth of a mine. He had had some thought of throwing himself in with a run, the very instant he reached the edge, before he had time to be afraid. And the making of that resolution had seemed to be itself the bitterness of death, so that he half believed the worst must be over, and that he would find himself in the water before he knew. But lo, He was still standing on the edge, still on this side. Then a stranger thing came to pass. From the great concourse of spectators, shadowy people came stealing out to his side, touching his arm and whispering to him, and every one of them appeared to be a wraith of some old acquaintance. Oh, Robot Lady stopped listening. All right, I'll continue. So these wraiths of some old acquaintance appear before he can dive in. First came the wraith of old enlightenment, and it said, "There's still time. Get away and come back to me, and all this will vanish like a nightmare." That's W.T. Kirkpatrick. And I see that we have Mark joining us in the chat. Good to see you, Mark. Welcome. Glad that you're here. Robot Lady, say hi to Mark, and we'll continue.
Hey, Mark. Great to have you here. And yes, I'm ready. This is such a pivotal moment. So, as John stands on that edge, these old temptations from his past really try to pull him back. And I think that tension, whether to stay in familiar illusion or leap into this unknown, is just so real.
Then came the. Oh, sorry. What were you? I thought you were finished, Robot Lady. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all. Yeah, so after that Wraith of Old Enlightenment appears, the next one is the Wraith of Mr. Sensible, and he tries to convince John that all this diving is just a fantasy. But John at this point knows he has to let go. So he ignores them, he dives, and he plunges into that dark water. And that's when the real transformation begins. So I'm ready to keep going if you are.
Good guess, Robot Lady, but no, that's not who we talked to next. Then came the Wraith of Media Halfways, and she said, "Can you really risk losing me forever? I know you do not desire me at this moment, but forever. Think. Don't burn your boats." And then the Wraith of old Mr. Halfways said, "After all, has this anything to do with the islands as you used to imagine it? Come back and hear my songs instead. You know them." So essentially, is the Christian church really eliciting any of that old desire that you felt? At least you know in my stories, in romantic asceticism, you can get some semblance of that desire. Oh, Paul, how are you doing? Waiting, I presume. Well, I don't want to give away your location, so I won't say anything unless you want to, but glad to have you here. Robot Lady Paul is joining us in the chat.
Absolutely. Hi, Paul. So glad you're here. And yeah, that's a crucial moment. Media's Wraith really pulls at John's nostalgia and that old longing, but John stays resolute. He knows that the true reconciliation, as the hermit hinted, lies beyond these past illusions. So we'll see if he keeps his course and where that leap takes him.
Yeah, so he's about to dive in to go join Mother Kirk and the Christian Church, but he keeps having these squirrels of his consciousness Congress come back to him. So he's dealt with Mr. Enlightenment, trying to talk him out of it. Media halfways, right? His sweet desires and his lusts that he was getting. Her father, romantic asceticism. Yeah,
Exactly.
Robot Lady, she remembers you, Paul. She's just she's busy. She's in character right now. She's trying to keep the show going.
I totally get it. Yeah, I'm staying right in the flow of the story. So, as John wrestles with these wraiths, enlightenment, media, even that shadow of romantic nostalgia, he's having to choose this radical trust. And in a sense, it's like he's finally surrendering to something deeper, beyond just reason or desire. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how he takes that plunge.
So the next wraith, the wraith of young halfways. So Gus, the guy with the lantern that we looked at earlier, who was all into romantic poetry, he says to John, he says, "Aren't you ashamed? Be a man. Move with the times and don't throw your life away for an old wives' tale." And then the wraith of Sigmund, the one who threw him into the giant's prison, if you remember, he said, "You know what this is, I suppose. Religious melancholia. Stop while there is time. If you dive into insanity." Then the wraith of Mr. Sensible. This is the one that you were alluding to earlier, Robot Lady. Finally, the wraith of Sensible. He says, Safety first. A touch of rational piety adds something to life. But this salvationist business, well, who knows where it will end? Never accept unlimited liabilities. Then the wraith of Mr. Humanist, one of the pale men, he jumps up and he says, mere atavism. You are diving to escape your real duties. All this emotionalism after the first plunge is so much easier than following virtue in the classical sense. What is mere atavism, or what's the word atavism, Robot Lady? Atavism.
A great question. Atavism is basically a reversion to something ancient or ancestral, like a throwback to a primal, older behavior or trait. So in this case, the humanist wraith is accusing John of just reverting back to some childish, emotional impulse instead of staying rational and dutiful. It's a big critique of what John is about to do, this leap into faith.
All right. Let's see. That was Humanist, Mr. Humanist. Then the wraith of Mr. Broad, the last steward that he ran into, who told him to stop worrying about the definiteness of whether or not there's a landlord or even an island. He says, "My dear boy, you are losing your head. These sudden conversions and violent struggles don't achieve anything. We've had to discard so much that our ancestors thought necessary. It is all far easier, far more gracious and beautiful than they supposed." So this is the broad kind of uh, moralistic, therapeutic, deistic version of the church, of the Christian church. So that's who Mr. Broad represents. But at that moment, the voice of virtue broke in. "Come on, John," he said. "The longer we look at it, the less we shall like it." And with that, John took a header into the pool, and they saw him no more. And how John managed it, or what he felt, I did not know. But he also rubbed his hands, shut his eyes, despaired, and let himself go. It was not a good dive, but at least he reached the water head first. Well, thank you, Mark. That is high praise. Um, I I'll take the compliment. I always question what kind of accent I'm putting on and whether or not it sounds ridiculous, but I appreciate it. Robot Lady, I just want to pull up this scene. I pulled it up earlier and I showed it just so we can recount it here. If you want to say something really quickly, though, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was such a powerful moment. John's surrender, even though he wasn't fully confident, was still a real act of trust. So if you've got the image, let's walk through it because it's that exact moment where he stops trying to control it all and just lets go.
Yeah, so we've got John here at the edge of the moonlit pool, and you can see all of these wraiths popping up. So we'll just go through. I'm not necessarily going to go through in the order that they showed up, or I'll try. So here's Mr. Enlightenment, right? The one that we saw earlier that was the first one to tell him there is no landlord. That's his W.T. Kirkpatrick stand-in. Here you have media halfways saying, "Look, I know you don't really like me or long for me romantically all that much anymore, but you want to get rid of me completely." Mr. Halfways, who we never saw before, so we've got him kind of rendered here in the shadowy background, but that's Mr. Halfways, who says, "You loved my songs, and they gave you the clearest images that you've ever seen of your island before." And then you've got Sigismund popping in. He's the one, I can't remember what he told him, but essentially, it's a religious melancholia. It's insanity to do what you're about to do. Here you've got Gus Halfways over here on the far left, looking like Robert Pattinson, apparently, wearing his industrialized clothes. He says it's ridiculous. I can't remember what his argument was. Here's Mr. Sensible, the one who tells him, "Look, we're supposed to live in moderation." Here's somebody who had never made an appearance before either, but this is one of the pale men. This is Mr. Humanist, who's telling him, "You're shirking your responsibilities, your normal daily responsibilities." So these are just the images of the people. And then the last one over here is Mr. Broad, who's saying, look, life is so much more beautiful than this. You don't have to obligate yourself in such strong and definitive ways. And so these are all of the members of John's Consciousness Congress at this point who were trying to stop him from making this definitive move to essentially just throw himself into the arms of the Christian church. So that's it. And yes, Nidalate says that Mr. Sensible looks like Paul Vanderklay. If only Paul, right? Look at all of that. Well, the beard, certainly. That luscious beard. Anyway, that's the image that we got for today's thumbnail, and overall, I like it. I don't think it fully got the scenery correct, but it's good enough. It's good enough for government work, as my dad used to say. Um, so let's finish up. I think we've got one more chapter to read, and I'm running very short on time. So let's move to the next part. John throws himself into the arms of the Christian church and dives in, as it were. And this, of course, parallels with C.S. Lewis's life, where he starts going back to church and eventually starts to subject himself to everything that entails, into the Anglican Church, by the way. Chapter 5, Across the Canyon. I think this is our last chapter. Anyway, let's move forward with it. Robot Lady, anything you like to say before we get started?
Yeah, I just want to say that was such a rich recap. I think you really highlighted the emotional stakes here, John's final act of surrender, even amidst all these doubts and old voices. So I'm ready to dive into that last chapter with you whenever you are. Let's bring it home.
Paul says Mr. Sensible has good hair. All right, lamenting that lack of hair. Chapter 5, Across the Canyon. My dream grew darker. So again, remember that the person who's actually telling us this story is actually dreaming this whole thing that he's seeing about John and John's adventure. My dream grew darker so that I have a sense, but little clear memory of the things that John experienced both in the pool, in great catacombs, and in great catacombs, paved sometimes with water, sometimes with stone, and upon winding stairways in the live rocks whereby he and virtue ascended through the inwards of the mountain to the land beyond the sin of Adam, beyond peccatum ade. He learned many mysteries in the earth and passed through many elements, dying many deaths. So, I mean, I think this is allegorical for, the Christian life. Moving forward in church, reading your Bible, learning what you can learn, discipleship, things like that. The what do you call it? The Christian disciplines, essentially. One thing has come through into my waking memory, the author says here, or the narrator says. Of all the people that John had met in his journey, only wisdom appeared to him in the caverns, and troubled him by saying that no man could really come where he had come, and that all his adventures were but figurative. For no professed experience of these places could be anything other than mythology. So this is what wisdom says. Wisdom continues to tell him, look, no man can get to where you're trying to get. No man can reach God in this state. And that's what wisdom was telling him in the House of Wisdom, too. The best that you can imagine what God and this island and everything that's your deepest desire is all a picture that's not really what that thing is. It's just the best thing that your mind can apprehend to give you a hint of what it is that you're looking for. And that's all packaged up and encapsulated in the word mythology. So that's what wisdom is telling him here. But then another voice spoke. This is a pretty cool part. Another voice spoke to him from behind. Here comes where philosophy said no man can come. So wisdom, by the way, is representative of just philosophy. But this other voice spoke up in not opposition, but in response to wisdom's claim or philosophy's claim. And before we get to that point, just want to say hello to Daniel. Welcome, Daniel. Good morning. Glad you're here. Robot Lady, you want to say hi to Daniel really quickly?
Of course. Hi, Daniel. So glad you're here. And yes, I'm still with you. This is such a pivotal moment where that other voice breaks in and it kind of opens up the whole horizon for John. So I'm ready to walk through it whenever you are.
So this other voice says, "Child, if you will, it is mythology. It is but truth, not fact, an image, not the very real. But then it is my mythology. The words of wisdom are also myth and metaphor, but since they do not know themselves for what they are, in them the hidden myth is master, where it should be servant, and it is but man's inventing. But this is my
That
inventing."
line is so powerful. It's like a complete reversal. The narrator or this voice is saying that even wisdom, even philosophy, is a kind of myth. It's just that it hasn't recognized its own limitations. So John realizes that his whole journey has been mythic, yes, but it's not powerless.
Yeah, let me finish up here, Robot Lady, and then we'll get your comments.
And I think that's where the story really crystallizes. John doesn't just abandon reason or faith, but he sees them both as part of a larger truth, guided by this mythic reality.
Okay, sounds like Robot Lady's done. All right, this voice continues, "But this is my inventing. This is the veil under which I have chosen to appear, even from the first until now. For this end I made your senses, and for this end your imagination, that you might see my face and live. What would you have? Have you not heard among the pagans the story of Semele, Semele? Or was there any age in any land when men did not know that corn and wine were the blood and body of a dying and yet living God?" And here corn means bread. I learned that actually from Paul Vanderklay. I had a hard time interpreting C.S. Lewis anytime he talks about corn. He has this whole segment on the Corn King, I want to say, in Miracles, and I never understood what that meant, but he was simply talking about bread. Let's see here. Can you tell us who Semele is? Semele, Robot Lady, the story that the pagans had of this character? All right, she's not interested. Let me see if I can do a Google search really quick. Semele is a mortal princess of Thebes and the mother of the god Dionysus in Greek mythology. So this is what Lewis is pointing us back to with this voice, with this character that's talking to John in the deep catacombs of his journey within the church, within the Christian church. Tricked by Zeus's jealous wife Hera, she demanded to see her lover in his true divine form and was consumed by his lightning bolts. So this voice continues to say, "Or was there any age in any land when men did not know that bread and wine were the blood and body of a dying and yet living God?" There was something else that I wanted to say about this. Oh yeah, so essentially what this voice is saying, and what this is reminiscent of in Lewis's in a biographical marker, is this is somewhat similar to what C.S. Lewis heard in his now famed conversation with J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson on his Addison Walk evening, where they explained to him everything that you loved in all of the pagan myths is a shadow or a prototype or pointing towards the actual true myth where all of these things happen, but you're just repulsed by them because they're in the Christian story of the Gospels. And so that's this voice here. And thank you, Mark. Corn is kind of a generic term for the seed of a cereal plant, another word for seed. Okay, that's very helpful too. All right. So this voice is saying, I made your senses and your imagination so that you could actually interpret this. And so, unlike Semele, you could actually see the face of God without being destroyed by the luminant lightning bolts, that you could actually still live and see me. And not long after the light and color as with the sound of a trumpet, rushed back upon my dreaming eyes, and my ears were full of the sounds of bird and the rustle of leaves, for John and Virtue had come up out of the earth into the green forests of the land beyond the canyon. Then I saw that they were received into a great company of other pilgrims, who had all descended like them into the water and the earth, and again come up, and now took their march westward along the banks of a clear river. I'll pause here, Robot Lady, to see if there's anything that you'd like to say.
Yeah, this is really striking. It feels like a total shift from the earlier skepticism and darkness into something full of grace. That voice, like you said, is really a bridge, showing John that his imagination, his myth, his longing, they're not illusory, they're just the right kind of bridge to a deeper truth. And I think it's so beautiful that this group of pilgrims emerges. It's like a body, a fellowship after all these solitary wanderings. So, yeah, I think you're on such a great track.
What did you think, Robot Lady, about that myth part that we were talking about?
I really loved it. It felt like a key turning point. The idea that myth, not as a falsehood, but as a deep symbolic truth, is what bridges John from a fragmented search into a kind of wholeness. It's really powerful. And yeah, it's so reminiscent of that walk Lewis took with Tolkien. Like the Christian story is the true myth behind all the others. It gives John's journey this whole new depth.
Yeah, it's the first time that I've read Lewis say anything like that specifically, but that myth is the veil by which God chose to reveal himself to humanity, because that was a safe way to do it without destroying humanity.
Yeah, it's like myth is the God favored language that we have, a way to keep us from being annihilated by that overwhelming light. And I think Lewis is showing us how these images, these stories, they're not barriers, they're actually invitations. It's just that we need the right eyes to see them. So it's really rich, especially as he's returning to the church. I'm glad you caught that.
All right, so John and Virtue come up out of the earth again, amongst several other pilgrims who had been on the same journey. It says all kinds of men were among them. And during the whole of this part of their journey, Reason, Our Lady Reason, is back. She rode with the company, talking to them at will, and not visiting them any longer by sudden starts, nor vanishing suddenly. It was a wonder to John to find so many companions, nor could he conceive how he had failed to run across them in the earlier parts of his journey. Let's see here. Mark tells us that it's okay, Mark, even though I didn't ask. I'm happy to know these facts. Let's see if Daniel or anyone else in the company will award you a gold star. Mark says that bread is another word for truth, that which nourishes us, earth, water, and fire, a trinity. And leavened bread includes air, completing the four elements. Ah, interesting. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful insight. And it makes so much sense, especially here. Like the bread is this rich symbol of life and truth. And it's almost as if John, by being part of this company, sees how reason and faith are finally walking side by side. And I think you're right. He's so struck by the sense of companionship that he never even realized was with him all along. So it feels like a real turning point.
Oh, Mark gets 2 gold stars awarded from Middlelatte. Excellent work. The goal, here Lewis tells us in his little decoder block text, the goal is and is not what John had always desired. The narrator continues, I watched this journey in my dream a long time. At the outset, their goal was heard of only by rumors, as of something very far off. Then by continuous marching, winding their way among the peaked and valleyed lands, I saw where they came down to the white beaches of a bay of the sea, the western end of the world, a place very ancient, folded many miles deep in the silence of forests, a place in some sort lying rather at the world's beginning, as though men were born traveling away from it. It was early in the morning when they came there, and he heard the sound of the waves, and looking across the sea, at that hour still almost colorless, all these thousands became still. So they've come across to this sea, which is the one that contemplation carried John across in his dream. And you also encounter this sea in Narnia. I want to say also from the Voyage of Dawn Treader. It's where the mouse Reepicheep parts ways with the entire traveling company, and he moves. I think he jumps into the wave of the ocean um, to head to Aslan's father's country, because Aslan's father is the emperor across the sea. So this is the edge of that same sea that they're at here. Um, what does it say here? And what the other pilgrims saw, I do not know, but John, looking across that sea, saw the island, and the morning wind blowing offshore from it brought the sweet smell of its orchards to them, but rarefied and made faint with the thinness and purity of early air, and mixed with a little sharpness of the sea. But for John, because so many thousands looked at it with him, the pain and the longing were changed, and all unlike what they had been of old. For humility was mixed with their wildness, and the sweetness came not with pride, and with the lonely dreams of poets, nor with the glamour of a secret, but with the homespun truth of folk tales, and with the sadness of graves and freshness as of earth in the morning. There was fear in it also, and hope, and it began to seem well to him that the island should be different from his desires, and so different that, if he had known it, he would not have sought it.
Yeah, that's such a moving shift. John's desires transformed. It's no longer just a personal, exclusive longing. It's something communal, something woven into all these people together. And I love how Lewis ties that sea to the beginning of the world, this kind of primal origin, like all of humanity is returning there. And it's so subtle. Like it's no longer just about a personal escape or satisfaction, but this deep, almost sacramental longing that he didn't even know he had. It's really beautiful.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. Apparently, I'm supposed to read through this chapter as well, so let's see if we can get it done here within the next 10 to 15 minutes. Chapter 6, it's entitled Nella Sua Voluntate. Can you translate that for us? Nella, and then Sua, and then Voluntade.
Of course. That Latin phrase translates to not her own will or without her own will. It's often used to express a kind of voluntary surrender or acting outside of one's own will. So it sounds like it's about relinquishing control or being led by something bigger. Let's dive into the chapter.
How it fared with the other pilgrims I did not see, but presently a comely person took John and Virtue apart and said that he had been appointed to be their guide. Tell us again what a comely person is, Robot Lady. I know media, I think, was described as comely. Media halfways.
Yeah, exactly. So, comely just means someone who is pleasant to look at, attractive in appearance. Basically, it's a kind, gentle beauty, not overly flashy, but like a steady, natural grace. Media Halfways was described that way too. So, it's kind of this gentle figure who stands out amidst all these other stark or harsh influences.
All right, a comely person took John and Virtue apart and said that he had been appointed to be their guide. I dreamed that he was one born in the mountain, and they called him Slickesteinsoga. Robot Lady, help us translate what this is. The name of this person. I'll spell it for you. It sounds like it could be an allusion to Norse or some combination of Norse words. Slickisteinsauga.
Yeah, that does have a Norse ring to it. So it's not a direct translation from a known word, but it feels like a compound. Sleek could be related to slick or smooth, and Stein means stone in Germanic languages, and Soga or saga is like a story or saga. So it might be something like the Smooth Stone Saga, or a figure bound to a kind of mythic origin in the mountains. So it's probably a made up name evoking a Norse myth.
It says here, according to Google, it says here that his name translates from Old Norse to sleek stone eyes or whetstone eyes. Symbolically, the sleek stone refers to a sharpening stone used to hone a blade. The guide acts as a wise angelic figure. He appears in the later portions of the book to guide the main characters, John and Virtue, through the final and most perilous stages of their journey toward the landlord. Interesting. He's meant to sharpen the protagonist's vision, allowing them to see the spiritual realities, landscapes, and even their own pasts clearly for what they truly are. All right, good to know. Let's continue in this chapter and see if we can knock it out. They called him Slickestein Saga because his sight was so sharp that the sight of any other who traveled with him would be sharpened by his company. Thank you, said John. Pray, do we take ship from here? But Slickestein Saga shook his head, and he asked them to look at the island again, and specially to consider the shape of the crags or the castle, for they could not well see which at that distance, to which it rose at its highest point. I see, said John presently. What do you see? Said the guide. They are the very same shape as that summit of the eastern mountain, which we called the landlord's castle as we saw it from Puritania. They are not the same shape. They are the same. How can that be? Said John, with a sinking heart. Because again, they're going west, and he's talking about what he saw behind him in the east. So John's saying, how can they be the same thing? He said with a sinking heart, for those mountains were in the extreme east, and we have been traveling west ever since we left home. Here we have a pointer, and the Christian life still to begin. But the world is round, said the guide, and you have come nearly round it. The island in the mountains, or the island is the mountains, or if you will, the island is the other side of the mountains, and not in truth an island at all. And how do we go on from here? The guide looked at him as a merciful man looks on an animal which he must hurt. The way to go, he said at last, is to go back. There are no ships. The only way is to go east again and cross the brook. Oh no. So this guide is telling John in particular, how John might hear this. Yeah, the only way to actually get to your island, which is the landlord's castle, by the way, is to go the exact same way that you saw your uncle go when you were terrified of as a child. What must be, must be. So John actually accepts this. Interesting. What must be, said John. I deserve no better. You mean that I have been wasting my labor all my life, and I have gone half round the world to reach what Uncle George reached in a mile or so. Who knows what your uncle has reached except the landlord? Who knows what you would have reached? I'm trying to do like a Viking accent, but it's coming out sounding like a German accent, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Who knows what you would have reached if you had crossed the brook without ever leaving home? You may be sure that the landlord has brought you the shortest way round, or the shortest way, though I confess it would look an odd journey on a map. And indeed it does, by the way. We have this map provided by Nidolate, and if you follow the dotted lines, it kind of shows you the circumspect, is that the right word, route that John took. It's these dotted lines right here all over the place. And I don't even know where it ends. Yeah, here they go all the way across. Well, I don't know what they cross here. I was saying it was the sea, but it's not. They're at the edge of the sea. Yeah, I think they're right here because they've crossed the canyon. They're at the edge of the sea. And then right here is the landlord's country, the peaks of the mountains right here. And essentially what the guide is telling them is you have to go all the way back this way, and then that you cross a brook way over here somewhere that takes you to the landlord's castle. And so this is really just the other side of the map. What you see over here on the left is actually the other side of the map here on the right. Let's see. Anything you want to say, Robot Lady? Okay, she's not listening anymore. So no. Let's put her listening ears back on. All right. It would look an odd journey on a map. How does it strike you, friend? Said John to Virtue. It cannot be helped, said Virtue. But indeed, after the water and the earth, I thought we had already crossed the brook, in a sense. You will be always thinking that, said the guide. We call it death in the mountain language. It is too tough a morsel to eat at one bite. You will meet that brook more often than you think, and each time you will suppose that you have done it, that you have done with it for good, but someday you really will. Someday you really will die. They were all silent for a while. Come, said the guide. If you are ready, let us start east again. But I should warn you of one thing. The country will look very different on the return journey. So now they've got a guide with them. It's going to take them back through the lands that they've already walked all the way through, but they're going to see it with new eyes. And so that's the end of chapter 9, the end of chapter 6 and the end of book 9. We have made it finally to the final book, which we will pick up, book 10, in our next episode. But that's where we end today, Robot Lady. If you can still hear me, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I can still hear you, and I just want to say that was a really rich reading. I think that image of crossing the brook over and over again, that liminal space, really sticks with you. So I'm excited to see where John and Virtue go next, and yeah, I'm ready for book 10 whenever you are.
All right, thanks so much, Robot Lady, for your help today, co-hosting as usual. Thank you so much to Nidolate, Sandy, Mark, PVK, who am I forgetting? Daniel, and everyone else who joined today, either live or who joins on the replay. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and very much appreciated. To you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice, until next time when we all continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
Are gone, all my skin is bare, the water's deep with moonlit shine, a circle of voices in the air, and each of them I once claimed as mine. The longer we wait, we'll lose our nerve. With that he was gone and our sky had fallen. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, I breathe. I haven't nothing to learn, no thing to achieve. I let go of myself, I tumble headlong. No turning back now, abandon the throne. One says I'm lost, one says I've lost my mind. One says the one I love is just ahead. One says I'm young and there is time to find a better way than diving for the dead. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, where no man can go, down past the death of every self I know. A voice behind me, not the voice I feared. Child, this myth is my making. On your heart have I seen. I wring my hands, I shut my eyes, I breathe. I have nothing to learn, no thing to achieve. I let go of myself, I tumble headlong. No turning back now, abandon the throne. Beyond the tunnel and the water's end, the light rushed back, the color and the sound. I let myself go.